Was Narancia's death forced? While there are some JoJo fans that would definitely argue that it wasn't, there are just as many, if not more, that would argue otherwise, and even go as far to say that his death was either unnecessary or that it just didn't really make any sense to begin with. So in this video I'm going to delve into this topic to discuss and answer the question of whether Narancia's death was actually forced or not. So without any further ado, let's get right into it by first discussing what it means when a lot of people say that a death is forced. So for a lot of people, a character's death in fiction is usually judged emotionally first and then structurally second. So when people call a death forced, they usually refer to it being a death that was made just for the sake of cheap shock value, meaning that the writers or writer just wanted a cheap emotional reaction from the audience, or that the death just lacked proper build-up and that it was way too sudden, meaning that it wasn't properly foreshadowed to happen in a way that made sense within the context of the story. Now, the reason why this is so important to highlight is because a lot of us consume stories and media for the emotional satisfaction that they give us. So when a character's death feels forced, that usually signals a narrative betrayal for some fans of that said series or that said character, or both, basically leaving those fans with a sour taste in their mouth, wishing that the death was written better or that the character got a better send-off when they died. In the case of Narancia, I can understand to a extent the frustration that some fans have with his death and how it was handled, with one of the main reasons being to do with Narancia himself, because right before he died, Narancia in his mind thought that him and the others had already won during the final fight, and that it was a good idea to openly mention the future plans that he would pursue after dealing with Diavolo, which instantly raises a very obvious red flag to the audience, even more so to those watching the anime for the first time, but I'll delve more into the reason why very soon. Ultimately, the point that I'm trying to make here is that it does make Narancia look somewhat incompetent, as he's letting his guard down a bit too easily here. Now, before I do continue, I should also mention that Narancia's speech was rearranged with some scenes in the anime compared to the manga. So from an anime standpoint, it doesn't look as bad, because in the anime, Narancia doesn't say his speech until after Mista shoots both of Bucciarati's legs. For context, Doppio was residing in Bucciarati's body during the body swap, but the group didn't know this and instead assumed that it was Diavolo instead. So Narancia letting his guard down can be a bit more forgiving here compared to the manga, because in the manga, Narancia proceeds to say his speech only after Bucciarati takes out Chariot Requiem by chopping off its arm the minute he makes his entrance with sticky fingers. The issue here is that Narancia talks about them winning and what his future plans are when none of them have the arrow in hand yet or know of Chariot Requiem's real ability, and also they are still having to be on the lookout for Diavolo in case he does attack with his King Crimson before they get a chance to use the arrow. Now, to look at it from a opposing standpoint and perspective, I can also understand why Araki chose to write the setup for Narancia's death like this. With Narancia, he developed a lot throughout the course of Part 5's story. He began as a very reckless, impulsive, and to be honest, a very stupid character that couldn't even solve a very simple math question, but as the story progressed, he changed and grew into a more confident, more brave and competent individual that could look after himself while also being a very viable member of his team. So why did he let his guard down during the final fight? And in a way that looks to be very, very questionable. I think the reason why is because for the first time, he believed that the danger was over. The adrenaline, the fear and the constant survival mode that Narancia had been in with Giorno and the others for most of the second half of Part 5's story had finally cracked, and what came out wasn't carelessness but hope. He finally believed that he was going to have a future, and if we refer back to his backstory, having a future was something that Narancia didn't believe in. He thought that he was going to end ended up dead and abandoned just like his mother, but thanks to him eventually finding a new home and a family in Bucciarati's group and going on the adventure that he'd gone on with them in the story, and with them being so close to taking down their former boss, he finally believed in having a future that he could look forward to, only for it to just sadly be taken away from him moments later at the hand of not just his former boss but also fate itself. Narancia didn't die because he was incompetent or because he didn't learn from his journey. He died because he finally believed that he was going to have a future, and to be honest, I don't think that dampens his character arc in any way. Now, I will say that I think the way his death was telegraphed was done in a way that made it too obvious that it was going to happen, especially in the anime where it includes a bunch of flashback scenes and mentions of both Abakio and Fugo, and also extra dialogue of Narancia telling Trish that they'll protect her no matter what, which is a very sweet scene, by the way. I don't want to take away from that. But the problem with this depiction of Narancia's death is that unlike the manga, where it clearly set up and foreshadowed his death, the anime instead just signposts it. It's like David Productions are choosing not to be subtle at all when it comes to the build-up of Narancia's death, and I think that caused a bit of frustration for some first-time viewers, so the criticism of it being too obviously telegraphed is fair and understandable, though mainly when it comes to the anime. With the manga, not so much. Again, there is a clear red flag, but it's not as blatantly obvious or in your face about it. Now, to move on to the next point I want to address, it's basically the fact that Narancia's death was forced because there was no reason for it to happen, or at the very least for him to be Diavolo's first target when he could have gone after Bucciarati or Giorno instead, as they were seen as bigger threats by Diavolo initially. Now, the issue with this argument is that a lot of the people who make it fail to understand that Narancia can use Aerosmith's radar to detect sources of carbon dioxide, and with it Narancia can track all life forms close to him that are breathing, while also allowing him to see the many different fluctuations of a person's breathing as well. After Mr. shot Bucciarati's body during the final fight, the anime subtly has Aerosmith's radar show the middle bottom indicator having a slightly larger dot than the other 4 dots on the radar. That dot on the radar corresponds to Trish, basically foreshadowing Diavolo's possession of her, but this also implies that had Diavolo let Narancia stay alive a little longer, then he would have eventually have noticed the difference in Trish's breathing compared to everyone else's, which would have made him at the very least suspicious, because it was obvious that if anyone else was gonna go after the arrow besides him and the group, then who else would it be besides Diavolo himself? Diavolo knew this, and that's why he decided to kill Narancia first. But even then, Diavolo didn't really have a choice in the matter, which leads into the next and final point that I want to address, and it's the fact that Narancia's death was considered forced because Araki apparently had to break the rules of how King Crimson works so he could justify killing him off. Or you could look at this as an argument from people who use this as a strong point to argue why King Crimson just doesn't make sense at all in the first place. Now, if you've seen my Diavolo video before where I talk about why he's such an underrated villain, then you already know what I think of this take about King Crimson, but I'm still going to address it anyway just to explain why it's just flat out wrong, while also discussing why King Crimson's ability works in the context of the story and Narancia's death. Now, to just quickly establish how the main ability works, King Crimson can skip and erase time for up to 10 seconds, and during that time, Diavolo cannot touch or be touched by anyone or anything. He's essentially intangible, and everyone around him is carrying out their fated actions or are having fated actions being done to them, while their consciousness and awareness is stripped away from them. Now, how King Crimson's ability has been used in the story in certain scenes is what confuses some people, and Narancia's death is notably one of them. Everyone knows that Narancia's death is tied to fate, more so than Diavolo causing it. But what is fate in JoJo's to begin with? Well, it's simple. Fate is the gravitational pull, forcing people and everything into predetermined situations and events that will happen in life that are usually unavoidable. King Crimson's main ability allows Diavolo to remove himself from any fated events, so he's not involved. This is the reason why him killing Narancia the way he did with King Crimson does make sense, because even if a situation happens because of Diavolo, if he skips it because of King Crimson's ability, then he's not involved in the situation anymore, but the situation itself still occurs because it's fated to happen and thus happened regardless. Diavolo isn't affecting things within the time skip, he's just simply moving away so he is not seen and the events destined to happen still happen. Diavolo can see what is going to happen within a short time span thanks to Epitaph, his substand, and then he can use his time skip to position himself into a more favorable position and remove himself from a predestined situation that will still happen even in his absence. In the case of Narancia, he died because he was always going to die in that fashion, because that is what fate had in store for him. Diavolo was always going to kill him that way during the final fight, whether he wanted to or not, and whether time skip was involved or not. But by using time skip, Diavolo removed himself from the situation so no one realized that he was hidden in one of their bodies. He only removed himself from the situation. Everything else, including Narancia's death, still happened because it was always going to happen. To put it simply, Diavolo basically had King Crimson do what it's always done, and that's to remove the cause and keep the effect. The cause of Narancia's death was removed, but the effect, being the death itself, was kept as a result. Now, as for why Bucciarati and the others didn't have fated reactions to Narancia being killed by Diavolo during the erased time, well, it's because actions in erased time continue, but the character's awareness doesn't, so the awareness is stripped away from other people except Diavolo himself. Other people will still move, still speak, and still carry out what fate has already set in stone and in motion for them, but they don't choose anything, so they can't interrupt their fated path, they can't adjust it, and they can't defend themselves. So basically, to put it simply, everyone affected by King Crimson essentially becomes like a puppet. They're basically like marionettes on strings, while only Diavolo remains conscious and in control. But ultimately, Araki did not break the rules of how King Crimson works just to kill off Narancia, nor has he ever done so at any other point in story. It's the same rules that we've been shown from the very beginning when it comes to how King Crimson works. Now, to answer the question of this video, was Narancia's death forced? Well, in case it wasn't already obvious from everything that I've said and addressed throughout this video, I think it's safe to say that Narancia's death was not forced at all. If anything, it was the complete opposite. While the setup made it a little too obvious that it was gonna happen, especially in the anime, the death itself was still beautifully executed in both versions. Narancia's death wasn't there for cheap shock value. It raised the narrative stakes during the final fight. It pushed Jono and the others to a breaking point both emotionally and mentally, while also reinforcing the themes of fate, relationships, loss, and the brutal reality of an unfair world where someone like Diavolo and his King Crimson exists. But that's just my take. What do you guys think? Let me know if you agree or if you disagree. Drop your thoughts in the comments down below. If you enjoyed the video, then please be sure to leave a like and subscribe for more future JoJo and anime content on this channel. This is your boy MAMZYY signing out. Thank you for watching, take care, and peace.